Dina was soaked to the skin. She hadn't seen any Dornish folk since she'd left the House Torroware camp 2 days ago. When she spotted the silver and orange striped tent through the trees, she thanked the grace of Ingatan, feeling a slight shiver of transgression at the borderline heretical nature of her silent words, and made her way through the thundering rain and the freezing wind to the tiny clearing. "Hello? Is anyone there? Is there a space at your fire for a troubadour? I have food to spare and songs to share." She had barely started her practice greeting for a stranger when the tent flap was pulled aside and a pale, dirty, exhausted-looking woman peered out. It looked like she hadn't slept in a day or more. Come in. Don't bring the rain or the cold with you, but while we've spaced in the tent, we've no fire to speak of." The tent was dark and cold. What little light there was from the outside was supplemented by a meagre half-candle in a glass jar. The floor was churned up mud, and the canvas walls were damp. It was still better than being out in the rain, but only just. There were clothes hung hopefully about the walls, surcoats and pieces of armour, but they were not getting any drier that Dina could see. The only dry place in the tent seemed to be a camp bed, on which slept a bandaged knight, her face deathly pale, her breathing shallow. The yo-folk squatted on her heels next to a ring of stones she had created, raised up out of the mud on a metal shield. She was trying to get a fire going, without much luck by the look of it. Finding dry wood in a 3-day thunderstorm on the edge of Boar's Dell would be a heroic task at the best of times, mused Dina. Never mind the added complication of a dying knight to look after. Her host glanced up quickly, her eyes full of the weight of her tiredness. "Half-tender," she introduced herself. "Elaine Half-tender, retainer to Sir Pellier of the Knights of the Argent Dawn. I'm sure she would greet you herself, troubadour, but she is, well, as you can see, she is... We have little hospitality to..." The yo-folk trailed off and went back to trying to light the fire, spitting spark after spark from her flint with grim desperation, but to no effect. Dina introduced herself, but felt that Elaine was giving her only half an ear. What happened?" "We had struck out on our own," said Elaine, her voice matter-of-fact. "The rest of the Argent Dawn were camping up, but Sir Pelina wanted to explore. We got lost. We found a field of flowers with thorny whips which the knight was easily able to deal with, but then one of them spat poison, and here we are. Is there anything—" "I don't think so," said Elaine. She paused at her task for a moment, twisting the dragon-bone ring on her finger so the strands of silver wrapped around it glimmered in the candlelight. "I have tended her wounds. It's the fever I can't break. We need some heat so I can boil some water and maybe... Wait, unless you have blade root. Marrowwort?" Her voice rose with the question, slightly hopeful, but Dina had to shake her head. "I'm afraid not. I'm no physic, and I don't have any potions with me either." Elaine seemed unsurprised, just another disappointment. She went back to trying to light her fire. "Between the wind and the water, I think the sky itself is trying to kill us," she grumbled as she struck metal against rock again and again. "Wind and water?" Dina was suddenly inspired. "Funny you should mention that. It puts me in the mind of a song. Unless you'd rather..." "It can't hurt," said Elaine. "This isn't a tale the Highborn would tell you," began Dina, then paused. "Probably wouldn't tell you," she appended. A lot had changed in 6 months. She realized she was getting distracted and she needed focus. She took a moment to center herself. "It's the story of a knight who went to sea, of doomed love, and of course it's a story of glory as well." Dina had dropped naturally into her patter, gently stroking the strings of her mandolin, despite the howling winds and the importunate rains, and the despair that filled the damp tent with heavy shadows. The notes she coaxed from her instrument were mellow and liquid. "Of course," echoed the yo-folk, a half-smile ghosting on her face. The first smile that had visited her lips in a while, Dina wagered. She began to strum her instrument more purposefully, and launched into the opening stanza of Between the Wind and the Water. As always when she played, she lost herself in the music, in the words, in the emotions that rose within her whenever she played what she thought of as one of the great songs, the songs that spoke to her. She sang of the loneliness of the sea, and of love growing from disaster, and hearts separated by water and station, and the bittersweet doom that found them both. As she reached the final verse, the singing of the two glowing stars reunited in the firmament by bonds of love and wonder, she felt hot tears on her cheeks. Not just hot tears either. There was a fire burning in the little ring of stones Elaine had prepared. It wasn't much, but the licking tongues gained strength as she watched, slowly moving across the wood. There was surprisingly little smoke. Elaine, exhausted, had rocked back on her heels, and Dina, marked with the trails of shed tears, had cut a path through the grime on her face. "A miracle," whispered the Yo-folk, as much to herself as to the troubadour. Dina said nothing, too drained to speak. It always took her a moment or two to recover when she truly put her heart and soul into the music. "If it's a miracle, it came from your fingers, and your loyalty, and your heart," she said when she could speak again. Elaine blushed a deep crimson, almost as hot as the flame. Before she could say anything else, they were both interrupted. "By the paragons, why does my head hurt so damn much?" The woman on the camp bed was sitting up, frowning. She looked pale and drawn, but there were spots of colour in her cheeks. "What happened here? Where are we?" The last thing I recall, Elaine was immediately at her side, checking her bandages, feeling her brow. Dina saw something unlock in the Yo-folk. She saw her breathe out a breath she no doubt had realized she was holding. "You nearly died," she said, scolding the knight. "That flower breathed something into your face, and you've been out cold for nearly 3 days. "I nearly died because of a flower, a murderous flower." The knight sank back, the camp bed creaking in annoyance, but her eyes sparkled. "Amazing. Let's find another one and see if we can get some of the seed out of it after I slay it." Elaine shook her head helplessly, laughing in spite of herself as she fussed over her charge. Dina took a moment to get her cooking utensils out, gently settling them over the weak campfire. A miracle indeed, thought to herself as she made ready to prepare some hot soup for the three of them. Overview. The role of the troubadour in Dawn is to use poetry, storytelling, and song to recount the deeds of glorious heroes, both living and dead. As the most visible Dornish priests, there is sometimes an erroneous perception that they are the only Dornish priests. There are plenty of spiritually active people in Dorne tending to their flocks, whether that involves instilling children with an appreciation of love, glory, and virtue, administering to a congregation of Yo-folk or nobles, or inspiring others with their own pursuit of a glorious, virtuous life. Yet it is so often that the troubadours lead the way when it comes to the faithful of Dawn. Their voices are particularly strong in the National Assembly, and during the autumn equinox there were 3 statements of principle that touched, at least in part, on the virtue, the glory, and the romance of Dawn. Having achieved a greater majority, each one has been distributed to the priests of the nation, who do not attend summits at Anvil for whatever reason, and each one has led to expansive interest in supporting the nation and its troubadours. The importance of recognizing talent. A cabal of weavers has offered gifts to the storytellers recognized by the National Assembly. A Summerhome noble house proposes a chapel be created to honor the finest troubadour in Dawn. Chanticleer Words recognized Claude Cutter, Roland Singer, and Tristane Tiller of Dawn for winning the contest of words. The telling of tales, especially about the romantic, glorious, and virtuous deeds of heroes and champions past, is at the heart of Dornish culture and the duties of the troubadours. The Thorns of a Rose, a weaver cabal who reside in Culwich, have particularly been impressed by this reminder of the importance of tales and stories. The leader of the cabal, Sibylla the Majestic, goes further. She pays special homage to the troubadours of her youth, explaining that it was undeniably their tales more than anything else that led her to pursue glory and virtue so vigorously and found the weaver cabal. In a gesture that demonstrates their largesse as well as the appreciation of glory, prosperity, and pride, they wish to recognise Claude, Roland, and Tristane, and by doing so encourage more people to look to the arts in Dawn. As such, they have prepared 3 magical bond rings, one for each of the 3, to encourage them on their quest for glory. They ask that the priests of Dawn hallow each ring suitably, and present them to the named Yo-folk. The egregore will have the actual rings and will work with the assembly to fulfill the request of the Weaver Cabal. The Cabal are not the only people moved by this statement of principle. As the winter solstice nears, the Earl of a minor noble house from Semaholm has unexpectedly presented an opportunity to the National Assembly to build a chapel specifically for the use of troubadours on her estates. This is of particular interest because these estates include Endrick's Hill and the empty tomb of the exemplar Elaine Silverlark. The telling of tales within Dawn is one of our cherished traditions for instruction of the virtues. Dawn thanks all those who took part in the summer contest of words for continuing this. In particular, Claude Cutter, Roland Singer, and Tristane Tiller for their joint entry that won the contest by the acclaim of our children. Chanticleer words, the Dawnish National Assembly, Autumn Equinox 383YE, upheld 206 to 0. Chapel for a troubadour. A chapel could be built in Ferrand in Semaholm for the specific use of the troubadours of Dawn. It would require a Senate motion or imperial wayleave, 14 wains of white granite, 28 crowns in labour, and take 3 months to construct. The troubadour of Auvergne would oversee a ministry and have responsibilities relating to the troubadour's role in Dawn. Earl Mathilde Cursion tends the lands where Lord Endrick Castrovallar is interred along with his fellow heroes, and where the empty tomb of Elaine Silverlark now stands. She offers her chapel up to whomever the Dawnish National Assembly recognises as the finest and most inspirational troubadour. The chapel of Cursion has seen better days, but Earl Mathilde believes that with sufficient effort put into rebuilding it, it would ideally be suited to serve as a place for the troubadour of Auvergne to perform. The building itself looks out across the flowering meadows to the burial mound, and the tomb of the woman most agree was one of the finest troubadours Dawn has ever produced. Part of the renovations would involve creating a venue for people from across the Empire to come to hear the tales of glory, love, and virtue, performed by the troubadours of Dawn. There would also be a fine house for troubadours to rest between journeys, and a seminary for sharing knowledge and a scriptorium for scribing the best stories so that they are never lost. By serving as a central location for the troubadours, the chapel would act as a ministry allowing liao to be exchanged for errant's wine and philters of strength, both valuable tools that any troubadour could use to inspire glorious deeds in the people of Dawn. Renovating the chapel would cost 14 wains of white granite and 28 crowns, and take 3 months. It would create the title Troubadour of Auvergne, which would be appointed by the National Assembly of Dawn and would be re-elected every year. In addition to overseeing the ministry, they would be responsible for gathering tales of glorious, romantic, and virtuous people, encouraging Dawnish folk of all stations to seek glory, love, and virtue, and supporting the other troubadours in their duties. Furthermore, Sibylla the Magnificent has declared that as long as the title is held by a troubadour, she and her cabal would provide a piece of regalia for the title, a fireglass delivered each year for the personal use of the troubadour of Auvergne. In the market for glory. A commission in Semaholm could encourage and support knights to fight against the Valorn, especially in Broceliande. The Dawnish National Assembly celebrates the victory of the Knights of Dawn and encourages them to continue the virtuous fight against the Valorn. Over the last year or so, the Valorn of Broceliande has been roused from its slumber. The Knights of Dawn have been particularly active in resisting it, and in questing against the heirs of Tyruniel, apparently responsible for raising its ire. During the autumn equinox, the National Assembly agreed with Yvain Vexiel that this crusade should continue. While there are several Valorn that threaten the Empire, the one the Dawnish know best is the terrible canker that twists at the heart of Broceliande, so it is no surprise that their response to Yvain's words focuses first on that hoary old beast. House de Garamont had long had an estate at Elvet near the border of lush Broceliande. During the recent struggle against the heirs of Tyruniel, the de Garamonts threw their estate open to knights errant and questing knights, as well as to the occasional bands of Navarre Thorns seeking a few days of succour away from the hungry forests. Their home served as the last friendly house before they faced the horrors of the Valorn. In addition to their noble holdings, the de Garamont lands are the site of the town of Raquin near Rue Castle. It is well known for the bands of knights who stop there before venturing into the lush and deadly forest, eager to try their might against the Valorn spawn that inhabit the lost ruins. These expeditions of questing knights and knights-errant are accompanied by yeofolk who, while the nobles are feted as guests of the Degaramonts, spend their time selling the treasures recovered from lost steadings and ancient ruins. This has led to a number of yeofolk setting up small stalls around the town to trade and barter with the sudden influx in resources, and a monthly green forest fair has been growing slowly in importance in southern Summerhome over the last few seasons. The Manor of the Greenwood. A manor would be constructed on the edge of the Degaramont States, specifically for use by adventurers seeking glory in Broceliande, and the Green Forest Market in Requeen would be endorsed and expanded. These two are part of a single commission that would cost 10 wains of white granite, 20 wains of weirwood, 40 crowns in labour, and take 3 months to construct. 2 titles would be created: a Noble Knight of the Greenwood and a Yeofolk Reeve of Green Forest Fair. The commission would also create a new opportunity for Dornish military units seeking glory by facing the Valorn. The Earl de Garamond, advised by her trusted seneschal, has proposed that a lodge specifically for use by questing knights and knights-errant fighting against the Valorn be established in her lands. At the same time, the Green Forest Fair could be endorsed, and resources committed to expanding the marketplace and fairgrounds, with an eye towards allowing anyone interested in treasures seized from the Valorn, from any Valorn, to barter with Dornish folk. Requeen is a regular stopping point for several Navarre stridings leaving Broceliande, and such traffic would likely increase if the proposed commission was completed, bolstering the fair even further. This represents a single commission, which would require 10 wains of weirwood, 10 wains of white granite, 40 crowns in labour costs, and the use of the Senate motion or imperial wayleave. It would take 3 months. Once completed, it would create 2 imperial titles. The Knight of the Greenwood would encourage knights and seekers of glory to quest against the Valorn, especially in Broceliande. The Reeve of Green Forest Fair would be responsible for overseeing the trading post and be offered favourable rates when purchasing treasures reclaimed from the Valorn of Broceliande. How the titles are appointed is up to the commissioner. The obvious, well-worn path is to have them appointed by either unanimous decision of the Senators of Dorne, by the military captains via the tally of votes, or through the National Assembly. Both titles do not need to be appointed the same way. The titles would be appointed each year on the anniversary of the commission being completed. The Knight of Greenwood would be a title intended for a noble. Provided a noble was appointed, then it would gain control of a sinecure that would provide them with 6 random forest resources and 9 herbs each season, claimed from questing against the Valorn or given as gifts by those resting at the manor house. They would be responsible for organising Dornish knights to quest against the Valorn and support actions to cleanse its taint from the Empire. The Degaramonds have suggested they might even go as far as to encourage the creation of knightly orders dedicated to this task. The Reeve of Green Forest Fair, on the other hand, would be a title suitable for a yeofolk. They would receive access to a ministry that let them buy materials from the yeofolk supporting the knights questing in Broceliande. The title is unsuitable for a noble. If one were to take the distasteful task of haggling over coins and treasures, all production from the ministry would be lost for as long as the noble held the title. Finally, while the Knight of the Greenwood and the Reeve of the Green Forest Fair were both in good standing, with a noble and a yeofolk holding them, the action Quest Against the Valorn would be available to characters with military units who take independent action in downtime. Rather than completely random returns, they would receive a mix of coins, random forest resources, and random herbs. Dornish characters undertaking the action would get the full production, but characters from other nations would receive nothing. The National Assembly could put a stop to this action at any time with an appropriately worded statement of principle that received a greater majority, and urge questing knights to look elsewhere for glory. If this were done, however, It would also halve the production of the sinecure and remove all save the lowest rank of production for the ministry. Out-of-character note. We would add an out-of-character note to the 2 title pages indicating that if the holder is not of the appropriate status, they must email Profound Decisions to let us know. Embrace our history. The Dornish National Assembly could pass a mandate to encourage the Assaveans who follow the way to come to the House of the Proffered Hand. Lady Eleanor Navarian holds the position of Lady of the Proffered Hand. We embrace our history as those who left Asavea to forge our future and go on to adopt the way. Let us exalt those houses who open their doors to the Asavean followers of the way who are inspired by our great deeds. Pelias Montrose, the Dornish National Assembly, Autumn Equinox 383YE, upheld 100-1. During the autumn equinox, Pelias Montrose raised a judgment within the Dornish National Assembly of the Synod, calling on the noble houses of Dorne to open their doors to the Asaveans currently living in the town of Trajados in Madruga, who are followers of the Way. A small group of these displaced Maracossan pilgrims are former slaves separate to the main faction of Asavean refugees, visited Anvil during the autumn equinox. While they clearly had some peculiar beliefs about virtue, and especially about the paragons and exemplars, their faith appears genuine enough for the Assembly to support Pelias Montrose's suggestion. Though some are eager to welcome those who follow the way into their homes, there are others who warn against the Asaveans' history. They appear to follow the way, but they do place significantly more emphasis on the paragons and exemplars than some are entirely comfortable with. It's not definite that their beliefs are fully compatible with the way as it is practiced in Dorne. Do they understand how virtue interacts with glory and love, for example? Both groups tend to agree that there is an obvious answer to these questions. The House of the Proffered Hand in Astolat was specifically built to offer guidance and teaching in the way for those who have been deprived. As such, Andred de Tremarg, a troubadour who spent some time among the Maracossans, has suggested the following mandate that would see a priest visit the Asaveans and encourage them to find new homes at the house. An understanding of the importance of love and glory aids every human soul on the path to virtue. We send, named priest, with 15 doses of Liao to encourage the Asaveans to seek sanctuary at the House of the Proffered Hand. Synod Mandate, Dornish National Assembly. This mandate would encourage the followers of the way among the Maracossan refugees to move to the House of the Proffered Hand in Astolat. It's not clear what the benefits would be beyond providing a safe place for these former slaves to catch their breath, learn about the way, and reconnect with their distant cousins among the Dornish. This latter seems most promising. It is likely that if these people were embraced by the Dornish and embraced their hosts in return, they would naturally seek to become Yeofolk, and perhaps in time form their own noble house. If there were problems, however, they would likely fall to the Lady of the Proffered Hand, currently Lady Eleanor Navarian, to resolve. There is some suggestion that a group of these Asaveans are already en route from Trajados to Anvil, intending to take part of some of the festivities for the winter solstice. If this is true, it would be an opportunity for the priests of Dorne to renew their acquaintance and further discuss the differences between their beliefs and those of the nation. It would not be a substitute for a mandate, however. The Liao and the work of the priests is necessary to get the entire community to move. Though usually the actions of the Wisdom Assembly and the Sword Scholars would require this mandate to receive a greater majority, the General Assembly passed a mandate to encourage the faithful such that this mandate only requires a lesser majority to have an effect.